he would just open the doors to the station wagon and he would pile every kid in the neighborhood, anybody who wanted. We were just jammed in there like sardines. And then we would get to the Starlight and then he would open the doors and we literally just all fell out and we would watch movies.
Oh, once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know.
Welcome to Not Forgotten, a podcast brought to you by the Doc Booth Foundation and hosted by noted writer Lyman, who has chronicled the stories, culture, and character of Utah's Dixie for more than 40 years.
It's an awesome day in Utah's Dixie. Made especially awesome today for me because three of my most precious and special and treasured friends are here today. We're going to talk about something that's really fun, but first I'm going to introduce you to these three women. We're all of the class of 73 of Dixie High School, and here we are these decades later together in a feeling of brother and sisterhood that's really special. And Donna Leavitt Gentry, she's a veteran of this podcast. You've heard her before here, as well as Lisa Whitehead Shaw. I include those middle names because that's how we grew up together, Donna Leavitt and Lisa Whitehead, and Debbie Holland Millett, who is here today with us. And it's so awesome to have you here, Debbie. Lisa also is a veteran of this podcast. You're a rookie, Debbie.
I am. I'm a rookie.
And yet, it's so exciting and fun to have you here. We're going to reminisce about going to the movies in St. George, growing up here and going to the movies, and the three key places where that happened at what we call the Gaeity Theater, which is now once again, the Electric Theater. It was originally the Electric Theater, but when we were going there, it was the Gaeity. And then up around the corner on Main Street, the Wadsworth Theater, which we knew as the Dixie Theater. And then we're even going to branch out onto Sunset, which at that time was old Highway 91, and talk about the Star Lite Drive-In and our memories of that. But as we think about that, it comes to mind the Reber family, Merv Reber and their family. They kind of had the monopoly on all of that, at least during the years that we remember. And I remember Merv Reber there at the Gaeity. I remember the Wadsworth Theater was the Wadsworth family, which was his wife. She was a Wadsworth, and her family came from the Panaca, Nevada area and started the theaters here. And then the Star Lite Drive-In came in a little bit later in 1949. It was called the Dixie View Drive-In. What an original name. And then it became the Star Lite. That was in 49, and then in the 1960s, as we remember it, it was the Star Lite Drive-In. But Donna, can you just get us started here with some memories of going to the movies?
Ooh, where do we want to start? My very first memory, as I've been thinking back, that I can remember going to the movies, my dad ran the projector at the Gaeity at night sometimes.
Really?
And I remember my mom taking my sister and I to the Gaeity. It was such a treat. We got to stay up late, and I got to go to the movie, and I remember watching Tweety Bird. That's all I can remember. I don't know what the movie was. That might have been the first cartoon. You know how there was always a cartoon before the movie? It was a Tweety Bird cartoon that we saw. And that's my very first memory of going to a movie at any of those theaters.
Wow, I hadn't thought about the projectionist, but your dad was a projectionist.
He did that for a time. I don't know how long. Like I said, I was really young. Just supplemented his job and would go there at nights and run the projector.
What a fun thing. My goodness. Lisa, what comes to mind as you think of going to the movies?
My dad and Marion Bowler were best buds.
And Jenny is Marian's wife, and Jenny's sister is Merv Reber's wife. And so they would take turns every other week who was going to run which theater. So one week it was Marian's turn, one week it was Merv's. And so we would go down there and visit with Marian at night while the theater was going on. And I was never allowed to go in the movies because I don't know why. My dad was really strict. That's all I'm going to say. But I could have popcorn. And so while the two men were visiting on the couch there in the lobby, can you remember the couch? And
You're talking about...
I'm talking about the Dixie.
And it had the most, what would you call it?
Opulent.
Yes, it was opulent. It was fancy.
It was the maroons and the golds
yes.
and the tassels and
the candy
And
counter.
the
yes,
candy counter.
the glass candy counter.
But do you also remember before you went in was the ticket booth? And
Yes.
that's where there was a phone. And so when the movie was over, I would go and I'd have to call my dad or somebody to come pick us up because Loyanne MacArthur and I went every Friday night to the movie. And I think it was like a quarter. Maybe it was 50 cents.
I don't know. I was wondering myself, how much did it cost us?
It was nothing.
It was less than...
I would tops 50 cents. I think.
Tops.
But when did you actually get to start going into the movie?
Probably when I was 8 or 9, Loyanne and I started going down on Friday nights because there was two showings. You remember that? The 7 o'clock and the 9 o'clock. And the 9 o'clock was for my brother and his friends. I was never allowed to go to that. And the cartoons, Loyanne and I would get to the cartoon, we'd watch the movie, and then we'd stay because the cartoon would play again, and then we would leave. Yeah.
Do you remember, Lisa, the first movie or or those first movies?
I remember several movies, but the one movie, there's several I remember. We saw Jaws there, and that scared me to death. But that one was my dad and Janice. That wasn't Loyanne. But we went to a lot. Yellow Submarine by the Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
With all of the James Bond movies, Diamonds Are Forever, but we would go to those. And the balcony, I was never allowed in the balcony at all because I was naughty. And I would throw off the balcony at people. And so Mary Buller wouldn't let me go up there.
You threw things off the balcony? You must have been the only person in the world who ever did that, Lisa.
Yeah.
But I thought it was fun on that balcony because as you sat on the balcony, you could see up into the little projectionist room.
Yeah.
And it was just a little tiny window, but you could see him managing the reels and changing the reels back and forth. And that was so interesting to watch the projectionist doing that during the movie, and so you were always changing of where you were looking.
And Debbie, that light coming out of there was so magic.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing.
And
was
every
so
now
fun.
and then they would make it wrong.
Or it would tear, and it would go flip, 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 flip.
Yeah. I would sneak up on the balcony. I wasn't allowed on the Remember? You could go both sides.
Lisa would sneak.
I know. I'm terrible. I know. Anyway, and that bathroom, can you guys remember the bathroom off to the right of the counter or the left? Oh, my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Anyway.
We're going to come back to a lot of things here, but Debbie, what are your earliest memories?
Probably my earliest memory was the Star Lite Drive-In.
Really?
My Uncle Herb, my mom's brother, Herb Bentley, he had an old station wagon, which all of us were so embarrassed to be seen in. But we did get to go to the theater with this. And so my aunt would fix snacks because we didn't have the money to buy things from the concession stands. And so, but Herb was so good. He was always just such a good-hearted man. And he would just open the doors to the station wagon, and he would pile every kid in the neighborhood, anybody who wanted. We were just jammed in there like sardines. And then we would get to the Star Lite, and it was, as I remember, it was $1 a vehicle. But I don't know whether that's real or not. But as I remember, it was $1 a vehicle, and we were just jammed in there. And then he would pull in, and you'd roll the window down, and you had that metal box that you put in your window that was the speaker. And then he would open the doors And we literally just all fell out onto the rocks that were there. And then we had brought blankets. And so then we would just lay on a blanket with those hard rocks underneath of us. And we would watch movies, and we would watch Come Follow Me, Follow Me Boys. We watched that's where we watched most of the classics. And that's where we got introduced to most all of the Disney movies, was at the theaters.
So, Debbie, you described that so perfectly. And I think I saw Donna and Lisa nodding, and I'm nodding too, because there was a Herb Bentley in every neighborhood. And my wife, Debbie Fry from Santa Clara, her mom, Joey, she was the Herb Bentley of Santa Clara. Yeah. And boy, could they load a bunch of kids into a car.
Pack them on and go deeper.
And that's her most vivid memory, is just everybody jammed into the car. And as your doors flew open and you rolled out, there were other doors all through the lot where people were falling out of the...
One time we drove off with the speaker in our window at the end of the movie. I can't remember what happened, but we were all so embarrassed. I don't know whether we broke the glass or whether we broke the speaker or whether we pulled the whole post out of the ground. I don't remember what happened. I just remember all of us sort of diving with our head underneath.
And Debbie, do you think you were the first or the last to do that?
Oh, I'm sure no one would ever have mistakenly done that before.
And that was why when you'd get there, you'd always test the speaker. You'd get pulled in, then you'd get the speaker and you'd test it. Oh, this one doesn't work. So then you'd have to, we'd get out and walk and find the speaker that worked good before we'd pull over to the next spot. Scout out a good one.
We did it with our kids too, though.
Oh, yeah.
My children, we would pack into a station wagon.
Oh, we put a mattress in the back of a pickup truck.
So did we.
And they could watch until they fell asleep.
Yeah. And it was always late.
So there's a double feature. And if they could make it through to the double feature, they could watch it. But usually they were asleep and the moms would stay and watch it. If it was a good one. If it wasn't, we'd all go home. But if it was good, kids are all asleep and you just stay and watch that second movie. And 2 for the price of 1. It was great.
I remember the dill pickles.
Oh.
There was this big old flipping jar of dill pickles in the concession stand.
I remember the yellow lights of the concession stand. Do you remember how yellow those lights were? That cast off there, and the smell. I can just smell right now what it smelled like to go in that concession stand. Yep. Such a treat to go over there.
We never had money to go. I mean, I think our parents just didn't think that food was worth spending money on. So they would always fix something and we'd take that. But we could find a dime. If we could come up with a dime, then you could go during the concessions and you could buy the Charms sucker. And some of the charms would have a sticker inside that you got an extra prize for that. The charm sucker, that was treasured for everything. So we would, before the movies, we're going to the movies, everybody was searching their couch cushions and looking under and finding a dime. And Frank Holland usually slipped Deb a dime or 2.
I can see that.
Yeah, I can too.
When we took our kids, we'd pop popcorn and pop so much we'd put it in a big garbage bag, a big clean garbage bag, and Twizzlers. I was trying to think what else. Pink mints. You know the pink mints
that taste like wintergreen.
Yeah, those were movie treats that we'd take with our kids because we wouldn't feed all of them at the concessions. We'd just take the popcorn. Everybody's happy.
Think of all the profits we took away from the Reber family by bringing all our food with us.
And all the people shoved into every vehicle.
Yes.
Some people in trunks. I know, I've seen people open their trunks and people spill out.
Yeah. That's so great. Donna, you and Lisa lived fairly close to downtown.
We lived on the better side of town.
Oh, don't start that.
West is best.
West is the best. East is the least. Sorry.
So, Debbie, you're out on Highway 91, basically right off the boulevard.
Right off the boulevard, yep.
Would you walk to the theater, or did you?
Oh, the downtown ones that we did, yeah. The downtown one, not to the Star Lite. But to those we did, you would walk there.
Do you guys remember walking?
Oh, we walked, and I am amazed now as I think back on it. We were allowed to walk home late at night. My sister and I usually would be, and we were young. And what a great place to be able to just walk home from the movie and not anybody worry a thing about it. Yeah. We just lived a couple of blocks down, and it wasn't very far, but still, thinking back on that, nobody would let their little kids walk today.
It's just amazing to think about coming out of a movie maybe on a September night and how awesome that would have been.
Just the perfect temperature, the perfect Christmas, everything.
Yeah. It's just, there's something really special about that downtown area and those two theaters. I was asking my dad, because they were both owned by the Reber family, I said, was there competition there or how did that work? And he said it just depended on what movie was playing at which theater. You'd go to either one. And that was pre-television. We're from the television age. We just barely are part of the television age. But we weren't jaded by television by that time yet. Going to the movies was still pretty special. And I can remember the first time I walked into the Dixie Theater, and I wouldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. But I remember you used the word opulent, Debbie. It was just like, oh my goodness. You walk in off the street into this, and if we saw it now, it would probably look
shabby.
It'd probably look like somebody's normal living room. But anyway, walking in there and just that feeling, I had never experienced sitting in a seat and seeing a movie on a big screen. And I think it was Swiss Family Robinson that I went to.
I saw that. Uh-huh.
And I remember a movie called El Cid. I think the reason I remember it so well is because Sophia Loren was in it.
Oh, there was what?
Sophia Loren. Oh. But yes, there were knights on horses.
And if there were horses, you would have loved it.
The El Cid fellow, I just remember I was haunted by that movie. And those were times when you'd go to a movie and then you would think about them for days and it would haunt you. And we could go home and turn on the black and white TV, and that was neat, but
But our black and white TVs were only, even if they were in the console, they still were only this size, where that screen was just took up the whole stage of that theater.
There's a lot more I want to talk about, but I've had a little bit of a revelation here. I want to do a phone your friend. And we've never done this before, Ricky, but I want to call my dad because he's 93 years old. He grew up on Tabernacle Street, 1 block from the Gaeity Theater in the 1930s and 40s, and especially in the 40s during the war years. He was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 during the war years and going to movies at the Gaeity at that time. I'm just going to give this a go and see how it works.
Hello.
Hey, Dad, it's Lyman.
Oh, okay.
How are you today?
Pretty well.
Well, good.
Pretty well.
I'm sitting here in Ricky's studio, and we are talking about going to the movies in St. George, the old Wadsworth Theater and the Gaeity Theater, and also the Star Lite Drive-In. And I wondered if you had any memories you could share with us. You're 93 years old. I don't know if I could find anyone else who could share memories who go further back than you, but what do you remember about going to the movies when you were a boy?
I remember that we would be able to go about once a week. It was the main thing for entertainment in St. George when I was a boy. In the late 30s, when I wasn't very old, we could go to either the Gaeity Theater or the Wadsworth Theater, and for about 10 cents a ticket. And I had a lot of good memories of going to theater. I don't remember a whole lot of the names of the movie stores. I went to a lot of westerns. Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, where they were the kind of the stores back then. A feller named Hoot Gibson that wore a great big hat that I seen one or two of his movies, but he was just a little bit ahead of my time.
You were growing up there on Tabernacle Street. It was a half block to Second East and then just another half block to the Gaeity Theater. So you hardly even had to turn onto the sidewalk and you were at the theater. Did your mom or dad give you an allowance to be able to do that, or how were you able to swing that?
Yeah, I don't remember that we had an allowance, but they would usually, when we were small, bring for the tickets for us to go.
A shiny dime to get in?
Yeah. For the first little while, the price kept rising, but it was just a dime when we started, and it would rise a little as time went along.
So did you go mostly to the Gaeity or to the Wadsworth or both?
It didn't seem to matter. Whichever one had the movie that we thought was the best one of the two, we'd go to. One of the first movies that I remember was Gone with the Wind. An interesting thing about that was Clark Gable had a scene where he said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." And that was, at the time, about the worst thing that had ever been said in a movie. And around town, it caused quite a stir. And Cleo Sullivan Wardle was a few years older than me. For some reason or another, we discussed the movie, and so from then on, every time Cleo and I met, she or I would say, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." But a statement like that back then shocked the whole community, and now people wouldn't even give it any consideration.
Yeah, now we're just all sitting here chuckling while you repeat it. So you would have been 7 years old.
Yes.
So you were going to the movies at 7.
Yeah. Like I said, going to a movie was one of the main entertainments we had when I was growing up. So,
did your dad approve of that, especially after you were learning those words at the movies?
Well, I don't remember how the folks took that for sure, but I just remember that most of the town was quite shocked to hear a statement like that in the movies. And I look at the difference between then and what's said on television and in the movies now, and people just wouldn't even possibly give it a thought.
The Wizard of Oz came out that same year in 1939. Do you remember seeing it?
Well, yes, I did, and that was another one of the movies that I remember quite well, and it's a movie that I seen for the first time at one of those theaters, and I've seen it dozens of times probably since, and it's one that sticks in my mind as one of the good movies when I was growing up, yes.
It's amazing to think that you were watching that when you were 7 or 8 years old, and then we watched it, and our kids watch it, and our grandkids watch it, and it's such a generational thing. But it's really interesting. You got to see it in its true form, in color, on the movie screen when it first came out. The four of us sitting here right now, our generation first saw it on TV, and our TVs were black and white. So we thought The Wizard of Oz was a black and white movie. And yet our parents had seen it in vivid color a generation earlier. And now our kids and grandkids still see it. But it's amazing to think that that kind of cultural touchstone was something that you experienced when you were 7 or 8 years old. And it's still meaningful and quite impactful to us now. So, Dad, do you remember the Star Lite Drive-In?
Oh, yes, I can remember the Star Lite Drive-In. I don't remember who started that or when it was, but I was a teenager,
Yeah,
probably in high school.
I think it was late
when
40s.
It started. I graduated from high school in 50, so they had what they called family night, and my brother Ken, who's a year older than me, bought a Packard. I think it was an old hearse, and he could load as many kids in it as he possibly could, and we could all go to the drive-in one night a week. They called it family night, and everybody that could get in the car could go. So we went most of the time when a whole group of us could go. And I remember when you were rodeoing at the posse grounds, it was still operating, so...
Yeah, I watched a lot of movies from the back of my horse. I remember you telling me once that your older sisters worked at the box office at the Gaeity.
Yes, I had an older sister, Ruth, and an older sister, Lenore, and they both worked there. As a matter of fact, it was in the very early 40s. We had a school up on the Black Hill for pilots learning to fly. And there was one of the fellows from California that came up and got acquainted with my sister, Lenore, and they were married and raised a nice family. So
That was Uncle Ray. I can just imagine that handsome young man coming up to the box office and seeing Aunt Lenore there behind the counter.
yeah,
And then look at their beautiful family now. That's pretty neat.
yes.
That's pretty neat. It's interesting to think or wonder how many relationships began at those theaters. I think we're going to have more to talk about here in the studio. But, Dad, thanks for sharing some things with us.
Well, I hope I gave you some information that's worthwhile.
Well, this has been great.
All right.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Talking about watching your movie on horseback, sometimes we'd be driving down Old Highway 91 and pull off just enough off the road, and you could watch, and if you rolled your windows down, sometimes you could hear enough that, and you'd watch for a little while and think, oh, this is pretty good. This is a pretty good movie. Maybe we'll come back to it.
You got your trailer.
Yeah,
You'd pull off the road and...
got that little bit, just that little bit of... If it was really good, you could stay for a while and you didn't have anywhere else to go.
Well, I didn't mean to just have Dad crash our party here, but it was fun to get that earlier perspective. Donna, what are you thinking now that you...
My older sister worked at the box office at the Dixie Theater when she had 3 little babies, a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a baby. And her husband left her, and she moved from Logan, Utah to St. George. And that is the job she got because her kids were asleep, and I usually babysat them while she went up and sold tickets. I can't imagine it paid very much for a single mom, but I remember those days very well.
That's awesome. Lisa?
To me, I just remember the Star Lite Drive-In. To me, it was the start of summer when it would open, because it wasn't open all year round.
Well, it was, but they just had that one movie the rest of the year. It was called Closed for a Season.
Oh, yeah.
And that movie played all through the winter.
And do you remember at the very end, the N fell off, and so it was closed for the CISO. And we drove by that every day for years. It closed for the CISO.
Anyway, I broke in on
No, I just remember that was the start of summer because you could go to the drive-in now. And yeah, just love the drive-in.
And we don't get that experience anymore.
No, we took our kids to the drive-in and we saw Sleeping Beauty or something like that, some Walt Disney, and it scared my kids forever and we had to leave early. Pack them in, leave.
Start up the car and drive out.
Take the speaker.
Be sure to take the speaker off.
Yeah.
Oh, Debbie, what are you thinking now?
Well, I had my very first date at the Dixie Theater. I can't believe that Frank and Alice let me go, but I went with my date and the rest of the first grade. And we went to Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, my goodness.
You were probably there because I think all of the first grade class went to that. So I think all of us were there, and that was my first date with Gary Nelson was my date.
Oh.
I didn't know if that was whether the date was going to be named or not.
Well, sorry, Gary.
We all know Gary. What a great guy.
I have a date story.
Let's hear it.
When I was in, I think it was 6th grade, a boy said, "Why don't you meet me at the movie?" So 6th grade, my parents would have died if they would have known I was going to meet a boy. But I went with my friends. He went with his friends. We sat by each other. And it was John MacArthur. So, anyway, we went to the Battle of the Bulge. How's that for a romantic movie?
But what's great is that you remember.
Oh, I remember every minute of it.
Did you hold his hand?
No, but he leaned over and kissed me on the cheek in the middle of the movie. And neither one of us dared move or talk the whole rest of the movie.
Were you on the back row?
Very back row.
Absolutely.
Very back row. There was only a couple of seats right there because of the way the theater was arranged. And we were in those 2 seats.
I always thought it was great to go into the movie and look back and see who was on there.
Yes. It was always older kids.
It was never me, but I always was interested in who it was. John and I grew up across the street from each other, and so now I know where he was on some of those nights.
Just, that was the only time, the one and only.
When my dad was talking about going to see Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, it took me back to an experience I had when I was interviewing Orville Bundy out on the Arizona Strip. And I was talking to him for my book, Far from Cactus Flat, which is a history of the Strip and of Lincoln Bundy, who was a cousin of his who was shot down in World War II. And Orville told me a story that day that has just stayed with me. We all know what the Arizona Strip is. It's basically that area from the Utah state line to the Grand Canyon, and it's one of the most remote places, even still, on Earth. Orville was born out there, and he grew up out there. And I was talking to him this day, and I'm just going to read this. Later, when I asked Orville what it was like living out here as a kid, he slowly dipped the brim of his sweat-stained cowboy hat against the waning sun, crossed his legs, and settled back in his chair. "Can't imagine anything better," he said. "Were you ever jealous of the town kids?" I asked. "Jealous of what?" he said. "I always figured they were jealous of me." He said they never got to go to town much, maybe once or twice a year. "I'll tell you what, though," he said. "I remember well the first movie show I ever went to, right there on Main Street in St. George at the Wadsworth Theater. I was maybe 6, 7 years old. It was The Wizard of Oz. By golly, if that wasn't something. You talk about sensory overload for a kid who had never seen any more of the world than the tail end of a cow going over the ridge. I tried to imagine little Orville dressed in his best overalls, stepping into that expansive, bright carpeted theater lobby, the same lobby I stepped into a generation later to see my first movie, The Swiss Family Robinson. At least I had the reference of some black and white television in my brain. It must have been a monumental moment for a boy like Orville off the homestead. When that giant color screen came to life, it must have been a magnificent awakening. And I can still see Orville talking about that, and his eyes bright, coming in off the Arizona Strip as a little boy and walking into that theater, never having seen a movie, and then there it is.
Well, I think St. George had a heritage of the Westerns. We had all of those John Waynes. We had all of the ones, the Conqueror, that they came from everywhere, and they filmed here in our town, and Dick's Cafe and everywhere where they all met. So I think the movies for us here was a wonderful heritage that we have that was promoted.
And that's true. We saw our landscape in movies, but we also saw the rest of the world too. Yeah. But it connected us.
Yeah. We'd say, hey, they had it as something else from somewhere else in the world. But we'd say, hey, that's the river up by Zion, and we'd point out what everything was in our terms, but they were using it for their own backdrops.
Dad mentioned about the old Posse Grounds rodeo arena, and that's where Les Bracken and I went every day after school in Woodward, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, actually into high school. When we had Mary Phoenix, the last period, we'd be able to give her a little note and then head on out to the Posse Grounds to ride. But in the summertime, we would be out there and we were practicing our roping. We were riding bulls and broncs. We were practicing all the rodeo events. And then right behind us, all of a sudden, the screen would light up. The Star Lite Drive-In screen. In the summertime, we'd be out there at night, and there were lights for the arena, and we would practice at night. But a lot of those nights, we didn't get much practicing done because we would just turn our horses towards the screen, and every once in a while, you could catch a little whiff of the sound, depending on, just like you were saying, depending on how the wind's blowing or whatever. And I distinctly remember sitting on my horse and watching Clint Eastwood, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And there I'm sitting on a horse watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it was an amazing thing. And it was sort of like, well, no big deal. It's probably like this everywhere, but I don't know. It was a pretty unique experience, I think. But then I remember, and Debbie, you're alluding to this, that after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid came out, that was when we could all say, that's the Black Ridge above St. George, or that's Snow Canyon, or that's the Virgin River in Zion. And I distinctly remember riding my horse into the roping chute, and I'm facing the screen, and I'm seeing Robert Redford and Paul Newman in Snow Canyon, and then turning around and going out roping my calf and finishing my practice run, and then coming back, getting on my horse and seeing Paul Newman and Robert Redford in Zion Canyon. And it was just one of those juxtapositions from teenage years that was pretty powerful. And you're right, Debbie, there was a connection not only to the movies that we'd go see, but to the fact that movies were made here, and that we knew this was a special place because of that.
We watched The Electric Horseman when I was raising my kids up in Idaho, and my husband and I were in the audience, and we were watching. And I think the people around us were sort of like, "What? Who are these strange people?" Because there's Kay Bundy's truck. Look, there's the old gym. There's the, and we were having the most fun through that whole movie, just pointing out what everything was, and everybody around us were like, who are these people and where did they come from? But the Electric Horseman, because there were so many iconic places within St. George that they portrayed in those movies.
So much in the Sun Bowl and all of that.
We went and saw them when they blew up the Electric Horseman. Do you remember that down by the Virgin River?
Harry's War.
Harry's War.
Oh, yes, Harry's War.
They blew that house up.
Yes.
And yes.
That's where Stonecliff is. At that time, that whole ridge was just one barren ridge. And during that scene, it was a flame, huge flames.
You kind of mentioned Clark Gable, and I have just a little tiny connection. Not me personally, but Clark Gable was filming a film here in town, and they needed some place to stay, so he rented my parents' home.
Oh, fun.
And he stayed there, and there was somebody else that stayed with him, and James Jackson now has bought that home, and he is going around trying to find out all the old memories that happened in that home, and who else lived there filming movies from St. George.
I hope he paid his rent.
I hope so, too.
Anything else you want to share that's on the tip of your tongue?
We appreciate you and all of you have done for literary and for the history of the southern Utah area. You just make it come alive. And when I was raising my kids, my mom would always send me your books that you were so good to sign for me. And my kids would always go, is there anybody in St. George that you don't know? And I said, well, all the good people are from St. George. So they were pretty impressed that I knew an author that could sign his own book. So
Thank you, Debbie. I can't tell you how much it means to all of us that you're here with us today. It's really wonderful to be with you. And I know that there's many other topics that the four of us could go into. We've tried to keep our focus today, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing your hearts today.
Thank you for helping us remember those good old days.
Yep.
It's always fun to talk with Lyman.
Oh, so fun.
Thank you.
The Doc Booth Foundation is dedicated to empowering individuals through educational opportunities and promoting mental health advocacy. Through scholarships and funding for important community needs, the foundation perpetuates the can-do spirit of the founders of this community, using the lessons of the past to chart the course for a better future. Make your tax-deductible donation at docboothfoundation.org. Not Forgotten is produced by Ricky Valadez and made possible by the generous support of St. George Area Zag Stores, industry-leading tech support and accessories. Lyman Hafen's books can be found at lymanhafen.com.
Once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. We came to Dixie, and we called it home. Oh, in Dixie, we've lived and grown. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. The hot winds were